Good morning, honorable members, and everybody who is in this room and those that are listening from outside in our radios and any media house. I want to welcome everybody in the meeting of today. Hopefully this day will be a fruitful day like the others, the past few days that we have in the inquiry as we started 2018. Honorable members, there is something that I would wish to clarify to the media, to the people of South Africa. We know that South Africans have interest in this committee and its proceedings, especially in the inquiry. I want to advise that we're in this process because we saw mismanagement and misuse of funds in the entity called Eskom. We are still in the dealings of Eskom. We are still dealing with Eskom. I just want to advise you and the people outside there that Acrimoniously yesterday came to the committee specifically to come and clear his name when he was mentioned by the deputy minister in a media statement. And in him being mentioned there, it was part of the inquiry. And the Committee of Public Enterprises, even before we started with the inquiry, we advised people that if you are mentioned, your name is mentioned in any platform that has to do with the inquiry, please come forward and come and explain yourself. There is a room open for that. So he came on those grounds. He never came to the committee to come and deal with PRASA issues. PRASA issues lie with the Committee of Transport. Yes, he did mention a lot of things that were happening in PRASA. That was part of what he had over the media. And by the time when all those dealings were happening between him and the deputy minister, they were part of the Department of Transport then. So he did not come here to talk about PRASA. Let us correct that. Please let us correct that. Let us correct the social media in calling us fools, people who could not ask relevant questions about PRASA to Acrimoniously. Acrimoniously did not come here to PRASA, and we are not in a state where we are going to deal with PRASA. PRASA is not part of the entities of public enterprises. It falls under the entities of transport. I just wanted to deal with that. I wanted to tell South Africans and to clarify the misinterpretation of what happened yesterday. Thank you very much, honorable members. I hope everybody now is aware what happened yesterday. Thank you. Chin. My apologies for that. I'm not expecting anyone to call me this time. The Deputy Minister, I am advised that he is going to take an affirmation. Is that true, Deputy Minister?
That's correct, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. We welcome you in this inquiry. We have been looking forward to meet you here in this inquiry. We hope our day will work very well. We will work very well with you because you are our Deputy Minister. Deputy Minister of Public Enterprises, Honorable Ben Martins. I am now going to read the affirmation. In accordance with Section 16 of the Powers and Privileges and Immunities of Parliament and Provincial Legislature Act 2004, as a witness to this oversight inquiry, please be informed that by law you are required to answer fully and satisfactorily all the questions lawfully put to you, or to produce any document that you are required to produce in connection with the subject matter of the inquiry, notwithstanding the fact that the answer or the document could incriminate you or expose you to criminal or civil proceedings or damages. You are, however, protected in that evidence given under affirmation before a house or committee may not be used against you in any court or place outside Parliament, except in criminal proceedings concerning a charge of perjury or a charge relating to the evidence or documents required in these proceedings. Please be aware that in terms of Section 17(2) of the Powers, Privilege and Immunities of Parliament and Provincial Legislature Act, a person who willfully furnishes a house or committee with information or makes a statement before it which is false or misleading commits an offence and is liable to a fine or to imprisonment for a period not exceeding 2 years. You are required to take and affirm that the evidence you are about to give is truthful. Can you do that, Honorable Deputy Minister? Affirm, take the affirmation.
I solemnly affirm that the evidence that I shall give shall be truthful, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. You'll just put your names and your signature in the document, and it will be taken by the officials. Deputy Minister, you are going to be led by questions if there is no presentations that you think it is necessary for you to do. Do you have a presentation that you need to make before?
Chairperson, there is a statement that I would like to read to the honorable members. A copy of this, in my understanding, was circulated to your good office. So I believe that members of Parliament do have a copy of the statement, but I will, however, go through it.
Do we all have the copy of the statement of the Deputy Minister? Thank you very much, honorable members. I will then give over to the Deputy Minister to read or to summarize in whatever way that you want. We've got the whole morning with you. You can read line by line. You can summarize. It's up to you. Thank you very much.
Chair, for the sake of clarity, so that I don't leave out anything, I would prefer if I could kindly read the entire document.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. You can do that.
I thank you. Honorable Chairperson, honorable members of the Portfolio Committee on Public Enterprises, Evidence Leader, Advocate Vanara, Advocate Libala, Senior Counsel accompanying me, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Honorable Chairperson, I thank you for the guidance that you have provided in your invitation letter of the 26th January 2018, namely to appear at this inquiry in my capacity as the Deputy Minister of Public Enterprises to address the allegation made by Ms. S. Daniels. In your letter, you further brought it to my attention that Mr. Lucky Montana will address the Portfolio Committee inquiry on the 30th of January 2018, and that there was a possibility that he may implicate me in his testimony. Ministers and deputy ministers have a duty to uphold the oath or solemn affirmation made on their appointment as set out in Schedule 2 of the Constitution. I solemnly affirmed that I will be faithful to the Republic of South Africa and will obey, respect, and uphold the Constitution and all other laws of the Republic. I undertook to hold my office as Deputy Minister with honor and dignity, and to be a true and faithful counselor, not to divulge directly or indirectly any secret matter entrusted to me, and to perform the functions of my office conscientiously and to the best of my ability. In the time I've served as Deputy Minister of Public Enterprises from the 1st November 2011 until the 11th June 2012, as the Minister of Transport from 11th June 2012 until the 9th June 2013, as the Minister of Energy from the 9th June 2013 until 20th May 2014, and as Deputy Minister of Public Enterprises again as of the 31st March 2017 to date. I have had the occasion to meet different stakeholders of different departments, mainly in my office, but at other times also at my official residence. In all the meetings that I've had with departmental and state-owned enterprises officials and stakeholders during my tenure as a minister at the Departments of Transport, Energy, and Deputy Minister at the Department of Public Enterprises, there was never, ever criminal intent on my part to abuse the status of my office for personal gain, nor did I ever instruct or coerce any official or functionary to act illegally or to carry out corrupt acts of any stakeholder and or interest group and or entity. No business, company, family, or individual, including members of my family, have received a tender, contract, or money as a result of a corrupt relationship with me. Anyone who alleges or insinuates that I have been party to a corrupt act or to the commission of a crime, or that I acted contrary to the solemn affirmation I made, has a moral and civil duty to lay a criminal charge against me and to prove it. Section 85 of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, 1996, entrusts the President with executive authority, which is exercised together with Cabinet members for A, implementing national legislation except where the Constitution or an Act of Parliament provides otherwise. B, developing and implementing national policy. C, coordinating the functions of the state departments and administration. D, preparing and initiating legislation. And E, performing any other executive functions provided for in the Constitution and national legislation. Ministers, in accordance with the Constitution, are appointed in terms of Section 91(2), read with Section 91(3), B and C of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, 1996. Section 92 of the Constitution, dealing with accountability and responsibilities, provides for accountability collectively and individually for the exercise of powers and their performance. Having been a minister in 2 portfolios, I know how important it is to appreciate the functions and authority of ministers and deputy ministers. Section 93 of the Constitution grants the President the prerogative to appoint deputy ministers. Deputy ministers are appointed in terms of Section 93(1)(a) of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, 1996. Section 93 of the Constitution states that deputy ministers are accountable to Parliament for the exercise of their power and the performance of their functions. Section 96 of the Constitution provides for the conduct of cabinet members and deputy ministers. In line with my affirmation, I have never undertaken any other paid work, including acting inconsistently with my office or exposing myself to any situation involving the risk of a conflict between my official responsibilities and private interests. The Public Finance Management Act only refers to ministers as the executive authority and does not refer to deputy ministers as such. Executive functions are thus the purview of ministers. In line with the PFMA, the department has a Director General who is the accounting officer that assumes administrative and operational responsibilities on behalf of the department. But although deputy ministers are not members of cabinet, they are bound by its decisions and must support the implementation of cabinet decisions. The Minister of Public Enterprises, Ms. Lynn Brown, has delegated oversight of the following state-owned enterprises to me: Alexco, Denel, and Safcor. The Minister of Public Enterprises, however, still retains the executive authority of these state-owned enterprises. The delegation to me is thus for administrative purposes. Such administrative functions include, amongst others, attending meetings of the said state-owned enterprises, checking the financial and operational reports on performance of the state-owned enterprises, and oversight of the projects of these state-owned enterprises undertake. Members of Cabinet jointly and severally have the responsibility to ensure that their functions are executed effectively and efficiently with the view of bringing about a better life for South Africans in line with the National Development Plan. The National Development Plan enjoins South Africa to build a professional public service that serves government but is sufficiently autonomous to be insulated from political patronage. The provisions of Section 195 of the Constitution echoes basic values and principles governing public administration. In essence, public administration must be governed by democratic values and principles enshrined in the Constitution, including but not limited to a high standard of professional ethics being promoted and maintained. On the 8th November 2017, Ms. S. Daniels, in a testimony to the inquiry, alleged that I was at a meeting attended by her, Mr. A.J. Gupta, Mr. Duduzane Zuma, and Mr. Salim Essa on the 29th July 2017. The official Department of Public Enterprises Deputy Minister's diary reveals that on the 29th July 2017, I had attended the funeral service of Mr. Ronnie Mamuepa at 7 a.m. at St. Albans Cathedral in Pretoria. I attended the funeral service, and at approximately 1:30 p.m., I departed from St. Albans Cathedral and was driven to St. George's Hotel in Irene by a member of the South African Police Service's VIP Protection Unit to attend the African National Congress National Executive Committee Lekgotla, which was scheduled to commence at 2 p.m. Upon my arrival at St. George's Hotel, in the company of the two South African Police Service's VIP protection members, I registered to participate in the Lekgotla and was issued with a Deputy Minister's accreditation card. After registering, I attended the Economic Transformation Commission, which was chaired by Mr. Enoch Kodongwana. Ministers Rob Davies, Ibrahim Patel, and Lindiwe Zulu, amongst other members of the ANC, made presentations at the commission. Throughout the duration of the commission, from approximately 2:30 p.m. until approximately 7:30 p.m., I sat next to the chairperson of the ANC Parliamentary Caucus, Mr. Seiso Mohai. When the Economic Transformation Commission deliberations ended for the day, I proceeded to the St. George's Hotel Conference Center dining hall, where I joined the dining table of Mr. Paul Langa, Mr. Vusi Mkhize, and other members of the ANC Logistics and Security Unit. I departed from the dining hall at approximately 8:30 p.m. and was driven to the official residence allocated to me in Pretoria to retire for the night. The journey was undertaken in the company of the two South African Police Services VIP security officers assigned to work with me. The chairperson of the ANC Parliamentary Caucus, Mr. Seiso Mohai, and Mr. Paul Langa, and other members with whom I interacted during the commission and dinner are prepared to attest to the aforegoing. I would now like to turn to some interactions that I've had with members of the Gupta family. During 2011, when I was the Deputy Minister of Public Enterprises, I had interaction with the Gupta brothers at the SABC TNA business breakfast arranged by the Department of Public Enterprises. There were no business-related discussions. Another time I met the Gupta brothers was shortly after my appointment as Minister of Transport. I met them at an Indian food fair they had organized at one of their homes in Saxonwold. Some ministers and members of the public were in attendance. There were no business-related discussions. During these interactions, I never abdicated my duties and responsibilities as a minister and deputy minister. I should now like to turn to a meeting I arranged between Mr. Tony Gupta and Mr. Lucky Montana. Mr. Montana arrived at the meeting which was held at my residence. The issue of PRASA's board was discussed between myself and Mr. Montana before the arrival of Mr. Tony Gupta and Mr. Duduzane Zuma. At the time, there was talk and rumors that Mr. Buthelezi and Mr. Montana were going to be removed as the chairperson and CEO of PRASA, respectively. I assured Mr. Montana that I would not support his and Mr. Buthelezi's removal, as there was no basis and justification for it. Shortly after this meeting, Mr. Tony Gupta and Mr. Duduzane Zuma arrived at my residence. Background to their arrival. Mr. Tony Gupta had called me sometime after I was appointed as the Minister of Transport and asked many questions about PRASA, about the PRASA tender to acquire locomotives, as he had an interest in the tender. I told him that it was my understanding that the tender process had run its course and that it was about to end. He asked more questions in regard to when the tender was advertised, in which print media it was advertised, for how long it had been open for submissions. He further stated that it was his belief and view that the tender process had not been open and transparent, and that he reserved his right to challenge the process in court. My response was that he was within his right to take whatever legal action he felt necessary. I, however, suggested that it might be advisable to first seek clarity to the questions he had posed from the CEO of PRASA, Mr. Lucky Montana, before taking the matter to court. I then organized the meeting and invited him and Lucky Montana to the official residence that was allocated to me as Minister of Transport. I saw nothing untoward in arranging this meeting between Mr. Tony Gupta and Mr. Lucky Montana, as its aim was to clarify and give answers to the questions that Mr. Gupta had posed to me. I did not at any stage ask Mr. Montana to unduly, irregularly, or illegally assist Mr. Gupta. There was no unlawful or malicious intent on my part in facilitating the meeting. I think it is important that at the time the meeting occurred in 2012, I think it is important to remember that at the time the meeting occurred in 2012, the context and public image of members of the Gupta family was not what it is today in 2018. Namely, a family perceived and projected as the personification of corruption incarnate. In 2012, the Gupta brothers were not persona non grata as they are projected to be today. All I knew then was that they were an Indian family originally from India who owned a medium-sized BEE company of moderate means named Sahara, and that they were trying to expand their business interests beyond the confines of the computer market into other business sectors. The objective conditions and the context under which the meeting occurred were thus different to those of today. Then, in 2012, the Gupta family had a medium-sized business of moderate means, unlike today in 2018, when they are perceived to be billionaires. It has to be noted that the meeting with Mr. Montana did not result in Tony Gupta obtaining the locomotives tender. The 2012 context and the current 28 context were thus different. During my tenure in the departments of Transport and Energy, it was not out of the ordinary for the ministry and the department to receive many queries relating to tenders, contracts, customer complaints, and various stakeholder issues relating to the 12 state-owned enterprises that fell under the remit of the Department of Transport and the 8 state-owned enterprises that fell under the Department of Energy. This also applies to state-owned enterprises that fall under the mandate of the Department of Public Enterprises. Ministers and deputy ministers, when possible, give an audience to stakeholders through formal and informal engagement. On that basis, I did with stakeholders, interest groups, entities, including ordinary members of the public in the course of my responsibilities. As a matter of course, most meetings took place at the office. However, some meetings took place outside of the office. At the end of the meeting, Mr. Tony Gupta was advised about the advanced stage of the tender process and that it cannot be reversed. In conclusion, Mr. Tony Gupta indicated that he would consider his option of taking the tender process on review. That brought the discussion to an end. A general point worth stating in regard to any meeting is that the intent of the meeting and the outcome of the meeting are important. I have not presided over any meeting where the intent was corrupt and the outcome was the commission of a crime, whether directly or indirectly. I have not abdicated any of my executive functions to any individual, interest group, or entity. In September 2012, Mr. Montana traveled to Germany to attend an Inno Transrail roadshow. I received a call from Mr. Montana requesting a meeting. He advised me that he was shocked as he had learned that the Gupta brothers told the rolling stock manufacturers that they work for President Zuma, myself, and himself. Upon his return from Germany, such a meeting took place. In all fairness and sincerity, I do not remember each and every detail of the discussions, but I do remember in particular Mr. Montana raising the matter of misrepresentation sharply, and that I also sternly rebuked Mr. Tony Gupta for abusing the name of the president, myself, and that of Mr. Montana. The meeting ended acrimoniously. Sometime after the second meeting, I recall receiving a letter from PRASA addressing the concerns of the chairperson and CEO that there were talks and rumors of imminent changes to the board and that the chairperson and CEO will be removed. In the letter, PRASA alluded to, amongst others, that the suggested restructuring of the board will destabilize the turnaround and modernization initiatives, including uncertainty at PRASA, and that at a critical moment, that would affect the integrity of the procurement process that was underway. I then gave the chairperson and CEO written and verbal assurance that I will not change the PRASA board, including the chairperson and CEO, without legitimate and valid reasons. Indeed, the chairperson, CEO, and board members were not removed. Another time I interacted with Mr. Tony Gupta was during May 2013, whilst I was still the Minister of Transport. Mr. Gupta called me and asked me if it will be possible for a plane conveying their wedding guests to land at OR Tambo International and for the welcoming reception to be held there. I declined this request, and as is common knowledge, the plane thereafter landed at Waterkloof Air Base, which was not in the remit of the authority of the Department of Transport. On the 9th June 2013, I was deployed from the Department of Transport to the Department of Energy. Procedural justice is the thread that weaves the fabric of justice in society. Procedural justice is thus concerned with making and implementing decisions according to fair process. It is my belief that no one should be allowed to use parliamentary It is my belief that no one should be allowed to use the parliamentary inquiry as a platform to settle personal vendettas or as a vehicle for organized character assassination. If there is anyone who has proof of me having been party to corruption or of me having been party to the commission of a crime, they have a moral and civil duty to report me to the police or any other relevant law enforcement authority. A fundamental principle of South African law is that everyone is presumed innocent until proven guilty. The spirit and letter of that principle is not that an individual is assumed guilty until he or she can prove themselves innocent. Another fundamental principle of our law is that he or she who alleges must prove. No one has the monopoly on truth. Each word has an echo, and so does each silence. I've been perplexed and astounded by the false testimony of Ms. S. Daniels, more so as to why she has not responded, more so as to why she has not reported the alleged meeting of the 29th July 2017, which, amongst other things, according to her testimony, brought the Deputy Judge President's office into disrepute by insinuating that it was malleable to corruption. I would have thought that as a member of the legal profession, she would have reported the matter to the South African Police Services and the Law Society of South Africa, of which she is a member. I would not be part of any process, procedure, meeting, and discussion intended to undermine the integrity of the office of the Deputy Judge President. Finally, I repeat that if there is anyone who has evidence of criminality on my part, they should report it to the relevant authorities. Honorable members, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Minister, for the statement you read in front of us. I would now give over to the evidence leader to take the process forward. Evidence leader, Advocate Vanara.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning to yourself, the Deputy Minister.
Morning, Advocate.
And members of the committee, the guests and colleagues. Deputy Minister, I just want us to quickly go back to your letter of the 5th of December 2017. I just want us to clear some of these administrative issues. In your response...
I must just say, Advocate, I don't have the letter in front of me, so I would depend on your engagement of the contents of the said letter.
This is a letter that you addressed to the chair of the committee, Ms. Lungi Mnganga Kabashe. Is that the document?
Is that the letter? Is it what, the letter?
It's dated the 5th of December.
Oh, then it's fine. Thanks.
In a letter that was dated the 30th of November, to which you are responding in this letter, you acknowledge having been furnished with a legal opinion, and you say you had not at the time managed to obtain advice on the opinion. Can you see that it is on the 3rd paragraph, where you say, I have not had an opportunity to seek legal advice on the legal opinion you provided?
That's correct.
I just want to find out if you have went to this letter, obtained legal advice on the advice that the committee received from Advocate Vam Trengov, SC.
The legal opinion of Advocate Tengrove, senior counsel to my right, made mention to it, spoke to it about it to me.
And is there convergence on the opinion, or is there a difference of opinion to that of Advocate Trengove?
From what I recall, senior counsel Libala next to me said that there are portions of the legal opinion of Advocate Trengove that he agrees with, but there are other matters of law in that opinion that he has a different opinion with regard to what's written there.
The issue around administrative justice applicability to this process, was there convergence or disagreement around that? You can consult senior counsel just to refresh your memory around that issue, sir.
Senior counsel says that there are aspects of the legal opinion that he differed with. I would request, through you, Chairperson, that he articulates what the differences were. He knows them better, because he's the one who told me what the differences that he had with the other Advocate, Trengove. That will make it easier.
Was senior counsel's opinion in writing, or was it as a verbal advisor?
It was both. He did finish a copy in writing, and he spoke to aspects of it.
No, it's fine. All I just wanted was, perhaps the senior counsel is here, just to speak on the issue of the applicability of the administrative justice principles to this kind of an inquiry. That's all that I just want a view from senior counsel.
The senior counsel to respond.
Thank you, members of this important August forum of our democracy. Certainly, an opinion of senior counsel remains an opinion. My colleague, Wim Trengove, SC, esteemed, is a senior counsel. I'm a senior counsel. My clients were advised of the differences in the interpretation of procedural fairness. To summarize it and assist this forum, the interpretation of the principles of procedural fairness are not unique to this important forum. This important forum does not have its own unique principles that govern procedural fairness. What has always bewailed the ministry, and in particular Minister Lynn Brown and the Deputy Minister, has been how the processes, in particular of implicated persons, in as far as this forum is concerned, was handled. Let me give an example. Implicated persons' versions were not put before witnesses. Throughout my sitting in instances where I attended this important forum. I've never heard the evidence leader saying to one of the witnesses, you are implicating Deputy Minister Ben Martens. I had a duty to go and consult with Deputy Minister Ben Martens after speaking with you, because this process limits cross-examination. Be informed that during my consultation with you, when you're implicating Deputy Minister Ben Martens or when you're implicating Minister Lynn Brown, I had a duty to go and consult with them and tell them how you're implicating them. I also had a duty in this forum to put their versions to you as the implicating witnesses. That's a typical example that we had. Now, fundamentally, that's one of the most bewailing concerns that my opinion had to deal with. And my interpretation of what fairness entailed in that regard differed completely from that of my colleague, esteemed Trengrove SC. To summarize it, Advocate Vanara, my opinion says you had an obligation together with members of this forum when you consult with a witness so that you should avoid one version. Now, the standards and the principles of administrative justice and fair administrative processes and procedures called upon you when you consult with a witness to say you are implicating Lebala. Let me give a hypothesis. The processes of this forum do not accept Lebala to cross-examine. I have a duty to put a version of Lebala so that one version should not be heard. And that's a basis upon which I differed with the conclusion of Trengrove SC. And that's what I've been advising the minister and the deputy minister from the onset, that let your versions or the versions of any witness also be put. And that's why, in my view, and remember, that's my view as senior counsel, Trengrove SC is entitled to his own opinion. I'm entitled to my own opinion. And in conclusion, I say, respectably before this forum, that I think the standards of fairness fell short, in line with that important fundamental premise of our democracy that says administrative fair procedures cannot be lowered.
Thanks, Council. And as you have said, it's a matter of two different opinions provided to different set of clients, and the clients acting in accordance with the advices from their lawyers.
Advocate Varana, with respect, may I close?
With due respect, Advocate, Senior Counsel Libala, we give people time to respond to any question, and and those people give other people also time to respond. You are getting into Mr. Advocate Vanara's mouth. You should give him a chance to speak. And then if he still wants you back, because we are not here for you, we are here for Deputy Minister. In fact, this is just a fair process that you are given to respond to what Advocate Vanara is saying on administrative issues, on legal administrative issues. So you are not here to interrogate anyone. Thank you very much. Advocate Vanara, over to you.
No, it's fine. Then back to the Minister. Thanks for the clarity. In the initial submission, I think it's part and parcel of the pack, Deputy Minister, that you've been given. Must be the second document, which is your submission that you made in December, together with the letter. You made reference to three set of letters. The one was the 9th of August, which the Minister had requested clarity on issues around procedural fairness to the committee. Can you see that? It's the second page of your submission.
I can see that 1.2.
1.1. Yes, 1.2, yes, you're correct, Deputy Minister. You seem to take an issue that this letter was not responded to at the time. But was the Deputy Minister aware that during this period, after the committee had taken a decision to institute the inquiry, that it struggled to get technical support in implementing its decision to conduct the inquiry?
I was not aware of that.
Notwithstanding the fact that the PLO and other officials of the department were in attendance of the committee meetings.
I was not aware of the challenges that you had as organizing one with organizing responsibility. I was not privy to that information.
Further, that the issues raised in that letter, at least is the Deputy Minister prepared to concede that these were legal matters in nature that required the committee to be advised legally?
Yes.
So the timeous response to the letter, if you were to be told that these were as a result of the lack of technical support to the committee at the time, would the Deputy Minister's stance change from the initial position of saying, look, these letters were not responded timeously?
That would be a reasonable response. The other issue that we should also take cognizance here of, Advocate, is that the letter was written to your office by the Minister. And the response thereto was expected by the Minister. And the information that I had was that letter had been sent, there had been no response to it. And from the side of the Minister, I got no further information whether there was a response or not, nor did she intimate to me that she was aware of the challenges that you had. So as I said, with the background that you have given, if a response of this nature was given, it would be appropriate for any reasonable person to understand why there wasn't a letter as forthcoming as soon as possible to explain what the challenges were.
Then there was a second letter. I see you're referring to it in paragraph 1.3 as the 16th of October. I assume that you're referring to the letter that is dated the 13th, which got to Parliament on the 17th, to which there was a response which you refer to in 1.4, page 3 of your submission, dated the 20th of October 2017. In other words, the second letter was responded to.
Yeah.
Then I want us to go to paragraph 1.9, page 4 of your submission, Deputy Minister, where you say in the Portfolio Committee's response to the Minister's letter, the committee indicated that in the event that a witness implicates an individual, That individual will be notified and may attend the proceedings. I was not informed that Ms. Daniels will implicate me and was not requested to attend the proceedings. And this is an issue that senior counsel has taken. Before we can deal with this, there is a tweet that was attributed to you, Deputy Minister. I just want to read it, just to confirm whether it was indeed your tweet. And this was on the 9th of November, 2017. This is after Ms. Suzanne Daniels would have testified. And it reads as follows. It appears to be Dikobe Ben Martins at Dikobe BM, where the tweet reads as follows: there are many ways to kill a man. The only ammunition you need for character assassination is to allege a phantom meeting with a Gupta without any shred of proof, and then drown what's left of your conscience with a glass of whiskey. Can this tweet be attributed to you, Deputy Minister?
My tweets, if you tweet something, it remains as a record. So I'll have to check the record of my tweets for the 9th of, the 9th of November. Offhand, it sounds like something I might have written, but I would have to check the veracity of the framing of the wording there.
That's fine, Deputy Minister. When you come to the conclusion that Ms. Daniels' testimony implicates you, is it because of legal advice that you sought, or is it a conclusion that you came to on your own?
If I understand what you are saying, did I come to the conclusion that she implicates me as a result of my assessment or the result of legal opinion that I received? My response is that on the basis of her testimony, placing me in a meeting I was not, that implicates me in some form of activity to which I was not party to. That's my assessment.
Okay. So you had not sought legal advice on this matter. You, on your own, assessed the situation and decided that this was implicating you.
From the information in front of me, this is the conclusion that I came to. Why would somebody place me in a meeting I was not? What's the motive of this?
In your understanding, what is it that you were implicated in? Was it just a mere presence in what you term a meeting?
My understanding, my recollection of the testimony that was given to the Portfolio Committee is that there was a meeting, and at the meeting, Brian Molife's matter was discussed. And at that same meeting, the issue of the Deputy Judge President's office was discussed as to how the date could be postponed to a later period or after a certain period. So all that, it's my view that it placed me in a context I would not be, where you discuss how to undermine the office of the Deputy Chief Judge President.
This was Ms. Suzanne's testimony before the committee, specifically around the reference to your name, that she had received a telephone call from a Mr. Salim Essa inviting her to Melrose Ark to have a cup of tea together. And that when she got to Melrose Ark, she was then taken to a flat in Melrose Ark, wherein yourself, a Mr. Gupta, were in the flat. That Mr. Gupta then started asking her about the status of Mr. Brian Molife's matter and when that case would be heard. And at the meeting, you didn't say anything. The sense that I at least got of the meeting was that this was not a meeting with an agenda to discuss a Mr. Brian Molife's pending case in court which was to be heard, but rather you found yourself in a room where somebody had raised an issue with her. So there was no reference to you. There was no reference to you having been part of a meeting and contributing to the discussions, nor having demonstrated any knowledge of a prior discussion on this matter. Now this is where and I must be upfront with you, Honorable Deputy Minister. At that stage, I, as evidence leader, did not see any evidence implicating you in any wrongdoing. Now, this is what I want to understand. What is it that you found so implicating in wrongdoing that could be attributed to yourself?
My response was just that, how does somebody place me in a meeting that I was not? Simple. And I couldn't understand this. Why should I be placed in a meeting? Somebody leads evidence here. And my rationalization of this afterwards was the response. This is why my response was what it was. Why am I placed in this context of this meeting? The response immediately was that Martins is in a Gupta meeting and what have you. Because as I said in my earlier statement, 2012, 4 years or what have you, it was a different dispensation. Right now, members of that particular family are regarded as corruption personified. So the next day that I went to address a press conference there, I was asked, why were you there in that meeting? It was not your innocent interpretation of somebody just being found there, you see. The association was that there must have been something wrong that was being done there.
So if I understand you correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that it was the mere association with the Gupta family that drew you to conclude that you were implicated in some form of wrongdoing?
As I said earlier, first and foremost, why locate me in a meeting that I was not? And I don't know what's being discussed there. And then members of the Gupta family are mentioned there. And in the current environment, so that raised questions in my mind.
So that will be consistent, and I do concede that you still to verify the wording of your tweet. Where you say there are many ways to kill a man, and the only ammunition you need for character assassination is to allege a phantom meeting with a Gupta. From this, I read again that in your view, in this toxic environment, an association to the Guptas is something bad, and that you need to distance yourself, particularly when you are of the view that it didn't happen.
As I say, I don't have the wording of the tweet in front of me. But what I can say to you, there are two poetry books that I wrote. Baptism of Fire, before I went to Robben Island in 1983, and Prison Poems. I think in Baptism of Fire, there's a poem that I wrote there, that there are many ways to kill a man. And that was referring to interrogation, torture, discrediting. So the context there, as I say, I can't, without the wording of the tweet that you referred to, and authenticity of that tweet, if it's my tweet and if I had written it, but the association I can see. So the wording there and the context would be from that poem there, that there are indeed many ways to kill a man.
Tweets are in cell phones, is that correct, Deputy Minister?
Yes.
Do you still have your phone?
I still have my phone.
Is it difficult to check this tweet?
I'll check it.
Can you check it, Deputy Minister, so that we clarify this thing once and for all?
I don't have the phone with me. It's with VIP Protection Services. Before I came to the meeting, I handed over my two phones to them.
Okay. You have given in both your submission that we're going through on page 6, the steps of what you did on the day. It is alleged that you were at this meeting. From 3.8, I think 3.14. And today you've also indicated that the people that you were at the ANC Lekgotla and the dinner are prepared to testify to that effect. But is the Deputy Minister prepared to concede that the individuals mentioned specifically in paragraph 3.14 cannot attest of the Deputy Minister's movements after he left the ANC Lekgotla that evening?
As I said in my statement, I left there at approximately 8:30 and in the company of VIP Protection Unit, and they took me to my residence. So the people I mentioned here, it states there that they can attest for the time I spent with them at the ANC Lekgotla.
The question is, Deputy Minister, they will end there.
Yes.
They'll say, you were here with us, we saw you. but they can't say what the deputy minister did after leaving the meeting, after leaving the NC Lekgotla. Is that correct?
Yes.
Let's get to your meeting with Mr. Montana, Lucky Montana. You issued a statement, and apparently in your statement, and this is one of the reasons that Mr. Montana came to testify on yesterday, where you implied or insinuated that it was Mr. Montana who introduced the Gupta brother to you. And Mr. Montana's version is that it is the other way around. And you seem to be confirming that today, that at the meeting that took place at your residence, Mr. Montana got there first, and that the two gentlemen joined the meeting. Is that correct, sir?
What I would like to correct is that the day after Ms. Daniels gave a testimony, I had a press briefing. And at the press briefing, I said specifically in reply to a question that was asked as to, have you had meetings with the Guptas? And I mentioned about 3 or 4 different occasions I had interaction with the Guptas. And one of those interactions that I mentioned, I said that there's a meeting that I organized in order to discuss issues pertinent to PRASA. Mr. Montana, I'm not sure if he saw that himself or he heard from somebody else about that briefing, got the impression that I had said that he brought the Guptas to me, which was never the case. It has never been said by myself. If there's a clip of that particular engagement, it will show me saying that I organized that particular meeting.
The different engagements, the Deputy Minister, between yourself and the Gupta brother or brothers, including Mr. Duduzane Zuma in certain instances. And let me be specific. When one of the Gupta brothers called you in connection with the landing of the plane at Waterkloof Base, I don't know, maybe I'm being misled by the sequencing of the events in your submission, but it appears to be long after interactions with Mr. Montana. Is that correct?
It appears to be?
To be long after interactions that you, Mr. Montana, and the Gupta brothers would have had around PRASA issues. Is that a correct understanding?
Yeah, it seems so. I would have to check the dates, but it does seem to be an event after that engagement with Mr. Lucky Montana.
And you do recall that when Mr. Montana came from Berlin, there's no factual dispute, at least around that. He came back, Mr. Montana that is, furious about what he'd learned in Berlin at the meeting, to which you also confirm. And in your testimony, you even rebuked Mr. Tony Gupta. Did you receive any complaints from a person or one of the Gupta brothers about Mr. Montana refusing to allow Salim Essa and Mr. Akbal to serve in the evaluation panel of this role, this tender that you had had discussions on?
No, I do not recall that. Because what I recall shortly, when I became Minister of Transport, the issue pertaining to the rolling stock acquisition for PRASA, I had been given a report by officials at PRASA that the process had almost run its course and was at an end. And I was also informed that the committee that was in charge of overseeing the tender process was a committee that the board of PRASA, CEO, there'd been a process, and independent people were responsible for that tender process, and they were in lockdown. There's a particular venue that they were where they were not in access with anybody, a secured venue. So that was the information that I had. And I could not see how anybody else would be parachuted into that process at a late stage.
When did you learn about that? Is it before you called Mr. Montana to your residence, where you were later joined by Mr. Tony Gupta and Mr. Duduzane Zuma?
No, the information as to what happens at various entities. As soon as I became a minister, I was given reports as to what's happening into the different areas shortly after my appointment.
So that would have been even before your meeting with Mr.
Yes.
Okay. Then if the process, you knew that this process was at this advanced stage, and you were approached by Mr. Tony Gupta with Mr. Duduzane Zuma about the process, why didn't you just give them the briefing that you had received when you assumed office? Why was it necessary for you, Deputy Minister, to call Mr. Montana to that meeting?
In my interaction with them, I told them that the information that I have is that the tender process was open, stakeholders, any interested party were entitled to engage in that process. So if they had not done so, that was their fault. Then he mentions the issues that I elaborate here in my statement. What was the duration of this process? Was it open and fair? Where was it advertised? A number of technical specific questions that I did not have the information to. And then somewhere along the line that he says that I will take this matter to court and what have you. And I say that there's somebody who can give you information in regard to the costs that this process has run. To obviate you taking the department to court, then I organized this meeting with Mr. Montana for him solely to explain to them where that process was. And that was the remit and extent of that meeting. And he did so at that meeting.
Was there any prior engagement between yourself and the two gentlemen that were at the meeting about Mr. Lucky Montana's suitability for his position as the CEO at PRASA?
No, there was no prior engagement with them in regard to Mr. Montana's position. As I was appointed Minister of Transport, Mr. Montana was the CEO, Mr. Buthelezi was the chairperson, and there were board members there. And in that context, I learned of, from Mr. Montana and Mr. Buthelezi, that there was word going around, there were rumors going around that the two of them would be removed from PRASA. And I said to them verbally, to Mr. Buthelezi and Mr. Montana, that I would not allow any situation where anybody can influence me unduly or anybody in the department to have them removed without justified reason. And I even went further to say to them that if that had to happen, then I also would fall with them, be removed with them.
Mr. Montana testified yesterday, and it is in his submission that, and in his submission that will be page 55, where he says that, and I quote him verbatim, they, in other words, Mr. Gupta and Mr. Duduzane Zuma, were arrogant and reminded Ben Martins that they did not want me, and he had convinced them that I was his comrade. Do you remember such a discussion?
I don't remember such a discussion.
Did such a discussion take place?
I've said I don't remember such a discussion in my presence. So in my presence, it did not take place.
Did it take place in the presence of yourself, Mr. Tony Gupta, and Mr. Duduzane Zuma?
I thought this is what I just answered now, that such a discussion did not take place in my presence, that they had to be removed.
You are aware that in your submission you're not dealing with this particular issue that you're disputing now? The refreshed, the latest submission?
Yes.
Why not?
The reason, I've not gone through Mr. Montana's statement. He gave his version of events yesterday. Until the commission started, shortly before he gave his evidence, I had not received his testimony, and I didn't watch his testimony over TV. So after he gave his testimony, all I had to do is prepare my input basically myself.
So your senior
So I've not gone through his testimony that he gave. I saw a thick tome.
So the senior counsel that was here yesterday and your head of legal who were given the submission did not bring this important thing to your attention. Is that what you're saying?
No. I'm saying that at what time, I don't know at what time they were given. All I've said to you was that at the time Mr. Montana spoke, before 2 o'clock, I'm not sure what time he spoke, I only had sight of the submission that Mr. Montana made was after senior counsel and the other advocate came back from the proceedings. And that was already late at night. So this particular portion that you referred to, I have not seen it.
I accept that you didn't see it, but they did not bring it to your attention. Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't remember them bringing it to my attention.
In your assessment of the conduct of these two gentlemen, Mr. Duduzane Zuma and Mr. Atul Gupta, did you at any stage find their behavior problematic?
In my interactions with Mr. Tony Gupta, I've seen an avid businessman who's looking for avenues to find ways of making money or strengthening his company.
In other words, you've not seen any wrongdoing in him?
No, I've seen that he's a person who, as I said in my submission, the first time I got into contact with them when they were running Sahara, and what I'd read about South African Sahara was that it was a medium-sized company struggling to grow. And on the various occasions, this is why I say that my impression, what I see, has been somebody like any other businessman who's looking for opportunities to empower or enrich themselves or their company.
Not even after Mr. Montana came back from Berlin and told them in front of you what they were doing in the name of the president?
That one I covered. My recollection was that Mr. Montana had given me a report on this, and then when we met him, we told him exactly what we felt about what, like he says, they allegedly did outside the country.
You said you rebuked them, that's
Yes.
your words in a statement.
Yes.
Did you rebuke them for doing the right thing, or did you rebuke them for doing the wrong thing?
I've never come across somebody who rebukes anyone for doing the right thing. So when I rebuked them, was on the basis of the information that Mr. Montana had given me, that there was misrepresentation, and that can't be correct, even if a person is an avid business person to enhance their company, but you can't enhance it with misrepresentation and utilizing the names of the office of the president, a minister, and a CEO in a company.
So at least for the record, that was the first instance that you saw there was something wrong here, correct?
Yes. That was the first instance that I had not proof, but I had to work on the basis of trust, what I heard from Lucky, the report that he gave me.
When they called you, when Mr. Tony Gupta called you for permission to land at Waterkloof, was that the right thing for him to have done?
I would like to correct that portion. Mr. Tony Gupta never called me for permission to land at Waterkloof. Waterkloof Air Base falls under the Department of Defense. It does not fall under the Department of Transport. So when he called me and asked if the plane could land at OR Tambo International, the size of the plane is like any other planes. I don't recall the exact, is it a 727 or whatever of the plane. The issue in question there is that many planes from different countries, since to be specific, a plane would come from India. It would have to land like any other plane. But the permission sought here was that when our plane lands at OR Tambo, is it possible that where the plane has landed, that there can be a welcoming ceremony there? As our guests get out of the plane, they can be received. And my response was that it can't happen for a few reasons, and I articulated the reasons as such. Any plane that lands there, as people get out of the plane, you can't have song and dance in front of the plane as people get out. And where people get out of the plane and where they go to stamp their passports, that falls under the remit of Home Affairs. It's not transport. So it's only after you have stamped your passport and you go through and you go to fetch your luggage. From there onwards is where the jurisdiction of transport is. So I explained all these things as to why it could not happen there. And I suggested that, in my knowledge, I know there's an airport closer to Sun City where the wedding was scheduled to take place. And I said, I've never been to Pilanesberg Airport, but what I was informed, it was a smaller airport like an aerodrome. They might be able to accommodate a plane landing depending on its size and organize a reception area. But I said that it can't happen at OR Tambo Airport.
I'm sorry, and let me acknowledge that I made a mistake. In your submission, it is OR Tambo. It is not the word Glove Base. In your tenure as the Minister of Transport, have you ever received such a request?
No, I have not.
Did you ask Mr. Gupta what was the basis of him making such a request to you about the landing of, about the dance around the airport?
He said that the guests, that would be a good way of welcoming his guests, if there's this ceremony there. And I said that unfortunately that cannot happen, it's not regular.
Was it not because he considered you a friend that he could ask a favor from a friend?
Mr. Gupta has never been my friend. Within the remit of my various responsibilities as Minister of Transport, before that as Deputy Minister of Public Enterprises and Minister of Energy, you meet many individuals from different stations of life, and you interact with them as far as work is concerned. If they make requests, where it is reasonable, where it's possible, you can do so. But under no circumstance can I say that Mr. Tony Gupta is a friend of mine. He's not a friend of mine.
Was it because of a relationship? It might not have been a friendship. It might have been because, as you say, you meet a number of business people, they express interest in this or that. Well, was it because of that he would have had courage? As you say, nobody has ever made such a request in your tenure as a Minister of Transport.
I'm not sure if it's a question of courage or somebody looking after their own interests, saying that, what can I do? People always push, for want of a better conceptualization, they push the envelope in their own interests.
The PRASA AGM that was postponed, you were still the Minister of Transport. Mr. Montana testified yesterday, and it is also in his submission, that an Indian chap had earlier referred or indicated to him that the AGM will be postponed, and that indeed the AGM was later postponed in 2012. Why was the AGM postponed?
I would have to check as to why the AGM was postponed. Preparations for AGMs involves the office of the minister, it involves the office of the DG, it involves the board of an entity, it involves the CEO, chairperson there. So there are a multiplicity of factors that can result in the AGM taking place on time or not. So in this particular instance, I don't want to just guess and say for this reason the AGM was cancelled. I would have to canvass and find out from that particular period as to why that particular AGM did not take place at the first appointed date.
One last question from the Deputy Minister. Is you are aware that your committee was looking at certain governance lapses within ESCOM?
Which committee?
This
when
committee.
You say my committee?
No, this committee.
Okay.
You are aware of that?
Yes, that's the remit of one of the aims and objectives of this inquiry.
And that there has been testimony that has been adduced before the committee, including that of Suzanne Daniels, to which you've responded. And in your December submission, you don't deal with the issues surrounding Mr. Tony Gupta and Duduzane Zuma. You only deal with that in your latest submission after Mr. Montana has made a submission and gave testimony yesterday. Is that correct?
That's correct. Then we should also look at the correspondence that I have received as the Deputy Minister. If I recall, Advocate, the first invitation was to deal with matters of governance at ESCOM. But the manner in which the letter was framed, my rejoinder response thereto was that in terms of delegations of responsibility, that is directly the purview of the minister. Subsequent to that, there was another letter that I received. And then I think that particular letter said, deal with the testimony of Ms. Suzanne Daniels. Then subsequent to that, a third letter was received. This was the letter of the 26th of this month, saying that Suzanne Daniels matter, yes, but also be aware that the issue, Mr. Montana, in his testimony, might, what's the word there, implicate you or, yeah. So in that context there, then I did not know what was the remit of Mr. Montana's evidence, if there's something that I had to engage or respond to. I could only do that late last night after the good advocate and the other advocate came back from this engagement to say that this is what transpired. These are some of the elements there. So on that basis, I responded to one or two of the issues. I could not have done so if that was not the guidance that I received from the committee. If we recall in my letter, or where I started, I thanked the chairperson of the committee for the guidance given to me, saying that the issue of Ms. Suzanne Daniels will be canvassed and the issues raised by Mr. Montana. Thus, I responded to some of the meetings and the issues to put them in context as far as I remember.
So before Mr. Lucky Montana came forward the deputy minister didn't deem it necessary to take the committee into confidence. Yes, disputing that you were at the meeting as alleged by Suzanne Daniels, but also saying, look, the only instances, as you've done now, that I met these individuals were these different instances. That's all that I want to find out. You didn't deem it necessary.
No, I think we should put things into context. You have just said that I did not deem it necessary to take the committee into confidence in regard to engagements with the Guptas. Am I misunderstanding you?
No, I'm just asking, did you not deem it necessary? I'm not saying you deemed it necessary.
Yes. What I've said that even in public, immediately after Ms. Suzanne Daniels made input here, I spoke in a public forum where I addressed a press conference about different instances where I'd met the Gupta, members of the Gupta family. So it's not a question that if I had not mentioned it in a previous conversation, I would not have mentioned it. I had no problem with mentioning that. This is why at the press conference, I gave instances that led to the misunderstanding that Mr. Montana had, that I had said he had brought Tony Gupta to me.
No further questions, Chair.
Thank you, Advocate Vanara. I am now going to give over to members to ask questions. But I just want to put it on record, members, honorable members, that we are not a court of law. The approach that we took as this committee is to listen to everybody whom we think will give us a clear picture of what is happening in ESCOM. We are not putting people on a stand here in saying you are an accused and you are a witness that is going to give evidence against the accused. So I just wanted to clarify, our approach is to get information from those people implicated and from people who think they have information that can help the committee to either clarify the implicated people or to further give evidence against the implicated people. That's the intention of the committee. We are not a court of law and we will never be a court of law. All our things, all our approaches will not be the same as a court of law. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you very much, honorable members. Gungubele, Honorable Mazoni, Honorable Swart, Honorable Ganga Kabashe, Honorable Dlamini, Honorable Luyenge. In that order. Gungubele, time 10 minutes each and less. Yes. Thank you very much, Honorable Gungubele.
I'm disorganized now by 10 minutes. All right. No, but it's not any time. Not any time. 10 minutes is. Can we propose, Chair? Yes. At least 15.
15,
please.
15 minutes for each.
Thank
but
you.
Mind your 15
okay,
minutes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Don't go beyond.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Chair. The question was asked to you, Honorable Deputy Minister, whether when tender queries are raised with you, you call a meeting similar to the one you called with Montana. What was the response?
You say, what was my response?
Or what is your response?
To?
When there was a tender query by Gupta's, you called a meeting with Montana for clarification. The question is,
Okay.
is that your tradition?
Honorable member, I did say that there are meetings. Most of the meetings take place at the office, but there are some meetings that I've conducted outside the office. And I did say that in this particular instance, there was a series of questions, technical, intimate questions about when did this take place, for how long, where was it advertised. I covered that and said that in that particular instance, where the party concerned felt that it would be necessary for him to take the matter to court, that I said that before you go to court, can I arrange that you meet with the CEO, who would be able to explain the history of this particular tender and answer your questions more appropriately than I can. So that was the context. So it's not to say that each and every person who comes and says this, I will try and assist with the information where I can.
Let me ask it this way. Is it the first time you called Montana to give such clarifications when such questions are raised?
In regard to the PRASA issue, the questions were specific to a particular tender.
I'm sorry, you know, there's an accusation outside there that we don't give you time to explain yourself, but it becomes a problem when you don't respond directly. My question is, irrespective of which other tender, you were working with Montana for a particular period as CEO and you're a minister. Is it the first time you had to call Montana to make such clarifications when such questions are raised?
Yeah, that was, in my recollection, that was the first time that I called him in particular in reference to that matter.
If it is the first time, this is the interesting part about this thing, that it means such questions have, in a similar way, have never been asked before whilst you were a minister. That question was unique amongst all the questions regarding a tender. To such an extent, that's the only time you would call Montana for clarification.
I must say that I'm not following the drift of your question, Honorable Member.
Remember, my narrative is that you explain why the question is it your tradition that when such questions are raised, you call Montana to clarify? You explained the reason. Now, my next question is, I'm saying that reason, was it a unique one, and as such, the only one that occurred during your tenure?
And now, where I'm not clear about is where you say that, was that unique, was that the only one in my tenure as the Minister of Transport? I'm afraid I'd like to answer you, but I'm not exactly clear as to what it is that I must answer.
Let me ask this question for the last time. Is the question in the manner asked by Guptas to you with regard to a tender and the weight you attach to it during your tenure in your department the first kind of its question?
From what I think you are saying, in my time, in my submission, it is clear that in the various positions that I have occupied,
Not in this one, in PRASA, in terms of language, not to our other
including transport. I've interacted with various stakeholders, and on the basis of the information they request, it depends who can best assist with the information. I would refer them to the relevant person. Where I can answer, I would give the information. Where I can't give or don't have sufficient technical information, I would pass the matter over to the DG. DG, what's the issue in regard to this? Or go to the entity.
Sorry, Honorable Deputy Minister, I think you understand my question. You don't want to answer it. Because my question seeks to check. I'm no longer asking for your response now. My question seeks to check this type of a question and the way to attach to it. When you were a Minister of Department of Transport, is it the first time you are, so that we can check how consistent are you in calling Montana to clarify such questions? And I'm clear you understood it. It's my view that you don't want to respond to it.
No, I would.
No, it's my view.
Yeah, then it's also my view that I've not understood how you articulated your question.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's fine. I'm saying my view, you understood it. Thank you. Next point. From Berlin, post-Berlin, Montana seeks to explain a lot of things that happened in the meeting where you sat, where, amongst other things, the Gupta said, we can also work with you, pay you through Dubai, and amongst other things, even outside that meeting, the postponement, the point is that did this occur, that they said they would pay him in the meeting that you attended?
No. They've never raised, no.
They didn't raise that?
Yeah.
In that meeting, for instance, the issue of Montana raising allegations of extortion of manufacturers during the conference, as a result of which he called this meeting. Did he raise these things in this meeting, Montana?
The meeting was called by Montana, and in that particular meeting, as I said earlier, the issue was raised that in furtherance of their business, he cannot and should not abuse the names of the President, myself, and Mr. Montana.
I asked a specific question, Deputy Minister, that Montana says manufacturers were put under pressure by Guptas to make certain payments. I'm asking, do you remember this being raised in that meeting?
No, in the meeting, he raised all the issues, including...
I'm asking a specific question. Was this question that I'm raising now raised?
As part of the meeting where he was saying that the names of the individuals mentioned were abused, he mentioned that from his knowledge, from his information, they were seeking to get monies from third parties because they were using the names. So that issue was raised in the context of that meeting.
What was the response of Guptas?
They denied this. He denied.
Do you remember the issue of the postponement as cited by, is it Issa? Or this third man? Do you remember the issue of a third man in the meeting? Who Montana says he can't remember the name. He says there were three, and there was Duduzani, who's this other one? Is there Edu? Who's this other? Whatever.
No,
but there's a third man.
There was
he calls us an Indian third man.
Yeah,
do you know that man?
Yeah. In that meeting, there was Tony Gupta, there was Duduzani, and there was a third Indian gentleman. I think his name was Prakash or Rajesh.
Montana says this man alleged that a conference of the 12th of September 2012 would be postponed. Were you aware of that?
No, I was not aware of that.
So you never came to knowledge?
No.
Are you aware, it is said that, so you say you're not aware, okay. Again, it is said that it's them who actually, they're amongst those who played a role that the board should be changed. And then you actually stood up and said no. Do you know who was responsible for the intention to change the board to remove Buthelezi and Lucky?
My interaction with Mr. Buthelezi and Mr. Montana, they informed me that the pressure to have them removed, they believed was from Mr. Tony Gupta. And I told them that I would not accede to any undue pressure.
Was that pressure exercised to you? Were you put on, forget what they said. Was that pressure put?
No, there was no pressure put into me.
So you had no reason to act on that at any point in time? You know why I'm asking all these questions? I asked a question to you about Dubai payment. You said that was not raised.
Dubai payment?
I said, they said they could work with him. Montana says in that meeting, they said they could work with him, they could pay him via Dubai. You said that was not raised.
In my presence.
Yes. Remember at the opening, you must go and check the sound. You said you don't remember everything that was said in that meeting. Yeah. But this one, you are sure it did not happen. Do you want to make a comment?
The undue pressure on me?
No. I asked you the Dubai payment narrative. You said this was not said in that meeting. And I'm asking, in your opening with Advocate
Yes,
Vanna,
in my opening
you said you don't remember everything.
I don't recall.
But this one you
everything
remember
that
was not said.
Yeah, I don't recall that being said in my presence.
You said it was not.
Yes.
You said positive no.
Yes.
Okay. My last point, because I had a lot of questions. Now, let's come to the Twitter. Your Twitter, you are reacting to an unfair accusation. To an unfair accusation by Suzanne Tanyas. And you don't remember what you said in the Twitter. And remember, you were preparing almost every day until yesterday and this morning. You were preparing to deal with whatever issue that affects you, in particular the one said by Suzanne. And you reacted through a Twitter. And you say you can't remember exactly what you said in the Twitter. If I was one saying that to you about my Twitter, would you find me believable?
In regard to Twitter, I have tweeted more than 2,500 tweets and what have you. I can't recall every word I've tweeted. That's a fact. If you can recall each and everything that you have tweeted.
On a matter serious as this one, which affects your integrity.
No.
And you were planning all the time to defend yourself.
So why should I recall that particular tweet for this engagement? Why should I?
Or you don't have to?
I don't have to.
Oh, thank you.
Why should I recall this tweet?
No, thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kungubel. Honorable Mazon.
Thank you, Chairperson. Deputy Minister, before you were made the Minister of Transport, did you ever meet with the Guptas at their Saxonwold home?
As part of my testimony, I stated there that as Deputy Minister of Public Enterprises, my first stint, the first time I met them was at the SABC TNA breakfast show, where the minister was in charge of proceedings.
All right, so I'm just confirming.
Some members attended there.
Yeah, no, many members attended that.
Yeah, subsequent to that, I did state in my submission that the Gupta family organized a food fair at one of the Saxon Vault homes. And I did state that I attended that.
And at that food fair, did you attend it with the then former DG of DPE, Mr. Jacinto Rocha?
No, I don't recall him having been there.
So
on that day.
you didn't attend with him? Okay. Now, Deputy Minister, you must understand that we find it a bit curious that you actually said to the Guptas, in no uncertain terms, that if they didn't like what was happening with the tender process, that they should go to court. But later on in your testimony...
No. I didn't say if they didn't like what's happening with the tender process, they should go to court. Mr. Tony Gupta said that he was not happy with some aspects.
Okay, so if they weren't happy, he will exercise his
right
duty?
to go to court. And I said that you are free to do so.
Free to do so, right.
Yes.
Okay. So you tell them this. You tell them you are free to go to court, do whatever you see fit. But then you still take Mr. Montana to see them afterwards. Why would you do this? Were you being bullied into having meetings with the Guptas?
No, I wasn't bullied into having meetings with them. It's what I've stated in my submission. My conversation with them is that he articulates all those issues. And he alleges that, according to him, he believes that there wasn't sufficient time. Where was the tender advertised? It is in that context that I say that in order to get information in regard to these aspects, it might be better to engage the CEO, who can give you the background, how the process was run, where it started, where it is right now. Instead of going to court, taking the department to court and the entity to court. That was the context.
All right. Deputy Minister, let me tell you, as a Member of Parliament, it's virtually impossible to get a minister or a deputy minister to have a meeting with you. So one can only imagine that being a member of the public, it's also quite difficult to gain access to a minister or a deputy minister, especially if you're a small sort of developing enterprise, as you said Sahara Computers were when you first met with the Guptas. Now, I've got to tell you, and it's not just me, I think a lot of people will agree with me, that it is highly suspicious that you have business meetings with people simply out of the blue, especially at your personal residence, because my understanding of good corporate governance is that, especially if you're meeting with someone who's interested in a tender, you do so in an environment such as your office environment where your meetings are recorded. So what I'd like to know is, how did the Gupta family get hold of you in the first place?
Let me start where you began. I would disagree that it's difficult to get all ministers and deputy ministers to engage with members of parliament or members of the public. In my experience as a minister, in my experience as a deputy minister, even to this day, when members of parliament have sought an audience with me, I've made that possible. In regard to the Gupta family and other business folk, when they've asked for meetings, I've sought to direct them to the relevant DDGs or the Director General, or where I can, I've engaged in those meetings. The issue of, in my statement, I've also stated very clearly that the majority of meetings of an official nature, depending on the remit of the meeting, would take place in the office. But other meetings that ministers and deputy ministers have do take place at residence. The issue concerned there also is that in this particular instance, as I said at the very beginning, as I got in as the Minister of Transport there, the information at my disposal was that the tender process had virtually run its course, was at an end. So when Tony Gupta asked to see me in regard to this tender, and he raises all the issues, nothing untoward in arranging for him to get clarity there, because I believe that you could not change the tender process when it's already coming to an end. You would not be able to do that.
Okay, Deputy Minister, let me ask you this. You said just now, and you stated quite categorically, that during your meetings with CEOs, the Guptas, even Duduzane Zuma, you had no criminal intent. In other words, you yourself had no intention of being involved in any corruption or any corrupt activities. Did they have any intention to be involved or to get you involved in any corruption or criminal activities?
No. As I said earlier, you interact with a number of businessmen. In regard to Tony Gupta, I did say here, my appraisal of him was a engineering, I'm looking for the correct word, a person who would look at opportunities and where he gets the opportunity, exploit them to the full to advance his business interests.
Deputy Minister, when you were Minister of Transport and you were approached by the Guptas to have this fanfare welcome, to welcome the aeroplane from India, and you quite correctly turned this offer down, it concerns me as to why you would have indicated for them to rather use the Pilanesberg. Because let me tell you what I would do if I was the Minister of Transport. If anybody phoned me and said, we want special treatment, a plane is landing, we want fanfare outside to welcome our guests, we're going to bypass all the usual things that every other normal human being should do, that every South African, every visitor to your country should do. And I would say, what you are asking me to do is A, corrupt, B, against the law, C, in every which way, shape or form, wrong. I would then pick up the phone, I would phone the Hawks, and I would say, this has been suggested to me, I think you need to investigate this. I would then pick up the phone and phone my colleague who is the Minister of Home Affairs and warn them that a group of people are going to try and gain entry to our country without having passports stamped, and certainly would not suggest that this plane goes to the Pilanesberg, where I don't think you could have correct imports, any diplomatic, any kind of diplomacy happening, any kind of home affairs oversight, and certainly the most unusual circumstances ever. And I'm actually quite astounded that you would have even suggested that to them.
May I respond to that? I said that the welcome service that they wanted at OR Tambo Airport would not be possible there. Pilanesberg, to my knowledge, is a smaller airport, and they do have trips to game reserves, other areas, and they do have reception areas where they accommodate their clients. Me having said that they should try Pilanesberg was not saying that there's a possible avenue where you can circumvent the regulations and authority of this country. That was not the intention. It was saying that OR Tambo is a very busy airport. You can't have any interruption for any ceremony there.
But Deputy Minister, let me interrupt you because our time is very limited.
No, but my response,
Magone,
if you ask the
give
question,
him a time to respond.
if you ask a question, you should also be prepared to listen to the response.
I've interacted, Deputy Minister.
Yes. So what I'm saying is that Pilanesberg is a smaller airport. They could, if they wanted, accommodate some of the requests. For them to have the people welcome there, but the regulations pertain to all airports and aerodromes. There's nowhere that you can circumvent the legal requirements in this country. But the fundamental point I'm making is that by me having referred them to Pilanesberg was not to say that you can't do this here legally, go and do it at Pilanesberg. That was not the intention.
Deputy Minister, once again, I say that I maintain that I think it's highly irregular that even at the Pilansberg it would be allowed. What concerns me even more is what gave this family the power or the assumed position of power to even approach you as Minister of Transport with such a bizarre request. And upon you turning them down and then finding out about the Waterkloof Air Base landing, did you question that? And do you know who authorized that, given the fact that you didn't authorize anything at OR Tambo?
No, I think I did try to explain this earlier. The remit of the authority of the Department of Transport is for airports within the country. And there are certain airports that are privately run with the necessary regulation. In terms of Waterkloof, that falls under the responsibility of the Department of Defense. The Minister of Transport does not have authority over Waterkloof Airport. We are not informed which plane lands there, who is in that plane. It's completely run by the Department of Defense. So in regard to that, I'm not responsible for that. I don't know who gave them the permission to land there rather. It became an issue where the relevant officials had to account as to how that plane landed there.
So in a cabinet meeting that normally happens on a Wednesday, it was never discussed that the Minister of Transport had said no and now the Minister of Defence or whoever had said yes. This was never a discussion that came up in a cabinet meeting.
The deliberations of cabinet are secret. The issue in regard to the Waterkloof matter was discussed there.
Deputy Minister, have you ever been instructed by the President to appoint anyone to any board?
No.
Have you ever been instructed by the President or by any Guptas to give a tender to a certain company?
No.
Deputy Minister, given what we've heard and what we've learnt in this ESCOM inquiry, do you think state capture is a real thing?
It depends what we mean by state capture. In ESCOM, there have been lapses of corporate governance. And there are individuals who are being brought to book in regard to those issues there in order to ensure that there's proper governance there.
Chair, my final question is more a statement. I went onto the Deputy Minister's Twitter account, and I must say, in his bio, he says he's an artist and writer, and some of the tweets are actually very profound. On the 21st of the 12th, 2017, Deputy Minister, you wrote, "A day is a very long time in politics. Alliances shift like sand in the wind. Former enemies embrace and kiss. Old friends clash and lock horns." No further questions, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Mazoni. I don't think, Deputy Minister, you want to respond to that tweet because it was just information that we get, that what is written in your Twitter account. I don't think you need to respond. I also don't want to be accused that I did not give you a chance to respond to that.
No. In regard to that particular tweet, the honourable member did give us, prefix to interpretation of the tweet. So I appreciate what you said.
Thank you very much. Honorable Dlamini.
Minister, when you were deployed as now Deputy Minister of Public Enterprise, I said to you, I think you were one of the last people in the ANC with integrity, but clearly I was wrong. I intend to prove to you that you are misleading this committee. The Guptas are your friends, and everything you did it knowingly. So there is no confusion in terms of I don't remember, I can't recall, and for the fact that you brought a lawyer, It already sends the signs. But let's go to the questioning. You're saying you met the Guptas in Saxonwald with other ministers in a food fair. Who are these other ministers that were there? Just give me two.
What I said in my
It's in your
submission
statement.
was that the food fair was open to members of the public and ministers had been invited. On that particular day, I can't give you two, but I remember that...
So you don't remember any minister? I just want names.
Please, you have asked the question. Kindly give me the time to respond to your question.
But I won't allow you to waste my time as well. I'll just ask a simple question. Who are the
for
names
the
of the two
response,
ministers? No, but Chairperson, I don't want explanation.
Chairperson.
It's a straightforward question. Give me two names of the ministers. If you can't give me, just say
You
yes or
can't-
no.
There are rules of engagement, you see. If you ask a question, you must be prepared to listen to the answer. You can't...
Even if it's a nonsensical answer.
Yeah, even if it's a nonsensical question, like
All right.
you are asking.
Let me ask you a question
that
again.
particular
Who are
day-
the two ministers that were there?
On that particular day, a minister that I recall was there was Minister Rob Davies.
Thank you. That's all I wanted to know. Right. On your statement, you are saying you met the Guptas in one of their homes in Saxonwald. How many houses do the Guptas have in Saxonwald?
No, in Saxon Vault, they have several homes next to each other. So the food fair took place in one of their homes.
Okay. Did you visit that house on that day at your capacity as a minister or at your private capacity? How did you, what you call, the request for you to visit there? You visited at your personal capacity or as a minister? The invitation?
The invitation was saying that you are welcome to your food fair to sample different types of Indian food. And I attended there. I didn't say I'm coming here as a minister or I'm coming here as
but
a
I'm
member
asking
of the
you
public.
now.
Yes, I just went.
You're saying the Guptas, they called you regarding the PRASA deal. They call you through your landline or your cell phone? Do they have your direct line? How do they call you?
They called the conversation that I had with him was on the landline.
At your office?
Yeah,
Not in your private residence?
no.
All right. So you're saying they called you, and what was the reason of entertaining their call? Is it because you went to their house to eat their food, or is it the normal business that you entertain, call of businesses, and you even take them to the CEO? What is the reason of you entertaining that call?
I told you earlier that the responsibility of ministers and deputy ministers is to interact with all stakeholders. And where you can respond to their requests is to do so.
Okay, and then your response to him, Atul Gupta, or any other Gupta when they're calling you, your response on the issue of PRASA, you said, according to your understanding, the process has run its course. Now, you are a minister. Someone calls you about a specific tender. How do you handle yourself as a minister? Executive authority. Do you respond to people according to your understanding, or do you respond according to facts? How do you work as a person?
Understanding is based on interpretation of facts.
So did you so you were saying, so I can assume that you knew the facts were there that this tender has run its course. So it's no longer an assumption. We want to get to simple English. So you understand that.
Simple English.
Yeah. What is the simple English?
Simple
on this,
English.
so that we can deal with these things.
Simple English is that the tender, on the basis of the information that I was given, on the basis of the facts that I was given, was that this particular tender is running towards its end. And I communicated the same.
Right. When you suggested that the meeting, the Guptas must meet Mr. Montana, the CEO, did you not think as a minister, with experience, educated, that you are exposing and compromising the office of the CEO by bringing business people to him? Did you not think, didn't that cross your mind?
No, I didn't think that I'm compromising him. The CEO of PRASA is very astute, and he knows his responsibilities. So I had no problem in saying that he should give answers to the queries that were raised.
Right. Did you know that Duduzane Zuma is coming to the meeting?
No, I didn't know that Duduzane Zuma was coming to the meeting.
So you were shocked to see him there?
I was not shocked to see him there.
Why?
Because I knew
Because
that
the meeting was arranged by the Guptas and Duduzane rocks up.
No, I knew that he works with Tony Gupta
How?
as a business partner.
Yeah, but how do you know? You are not into their business. How do you know that?
How do I know that? I've known, it's public knowledge. And Duduzane Gupta was not the first time that I met him there.
Okay. Right, now that Duduzane Gupta is
Duduzane
working.
Zuma. Yeah.
Oh, Duduzane, okay. Now, Duduzane, you are a member of the cabinet, serving under Jacob Zuma. You arrange a meeting for the Guptas to meet the CEO. Jacob Zuma's son comes into the meeting. No, it's not. Jacob Zuma's son comes to the meeting. As a person of integrity, that I assume you are serving in the cabinet. Did you go back to Jacob Zuma and say, President, I'm a member of your cabinet. I arranged a meeting for the Guptas to meet the CEO, and your son arrived there, just to know, so that, because we are dealing with issues of integrity, and I think as a president, did you tell Zuma that his son came to a meeting that you arranged for PRASA CEO?
No, I saw nothing untoward. Duduzane Zuma accompanying his business associate to a meeting. And I did not see any necessity to raise the issue with the president.
Nothing?
Nothing.
Yeah. Okay. 32.8 of your statement. Let me just quickly go through it, Chairperson. You're saying, I think it is important to remember that at the meeting occurred in 2012, the context and the public image of members of the Gupta family was not what it is today. Namely, a family perceived and projected as personification of corruption incarnate. Yeah, you are a real poet.
Incarnate.
Now, let's leave that. You are saying it's perceived. Why do you say that?
I'm saying that because in my contribution to the Portfolio Committee today, I've said that conditions in 2012 and conditions in 2018 are different. Then at that particular stage, they were responsible for a medium-sized company. And in the public mind, in the court of public opinion, they had not been adjudged as this
Corrupt.
family
That
that
is
is seen as corrupt. But today, 2018, the general projection in the public is that they are responsible for corruption.
Is that
And
true?
I say that that is a perception. A perception, you have to prove the facts, whether they are or not. So in order for that to be proved, I can have an impression of anybody, but I would need to substantiate my perception or my view with facts. So in regard to them, they have to be charged in a court of law and be found guilty for the crimes that they might be accused of. So this is what I'm saying.
So in the public opinion, they are perceived. And,
Yes.
and you are saying that can be correct, according to your own opinion, because this is not a fact. Is that an
I'm not
opinion? It's a
saying,
view?
I can't give a judgment on public opinion
Okay,
and
but you're saying
perception. So
they
I'm
are
saying
perceived.
that that is the perception currently.
Okay, let's go then to, because you are saying it's a perception, and the perception, it must be on your basis. It
Must be
followed.
proved.
It must be proved. Now, let's go to 32.10. You are saying again, they are perceived to be billionaires. You are saying they are perceived to be billionaires.
Yes, I've
I'm
stated that.
putting it to you that it's not a perception, because it's your friends, you went to go that way. The results of the 10 richest people in South Africa 2016, Atul Gupta is number 7 with 10.7 billion. That is no longer a perception. So why are you saying they are perceived to be billionaires?
No.
When Atul is no longer a perception, he is.
You should not impose your views on me. If you believe the report that you have read, that they are billionaires, I have not read the report. I don't know the veracity of the report, scientific veracity of the report that you have read. My reason for saying that this is a perception, I have not seen any member of the Gupta's bank statement to see how much they are worth. So I can't say that they are billionaires or millionaires or they are poor. From what I've seen, I can't categorize them as poor people. But I can't say that they are billionaires. This is why I say there's perception there.
You've served with me in the portfolio
I did.
of Public Works. Am I honorable, Lamin?
Sometimes you are honorable, Lamin. Sometimes your behavior is not honorable.
Okay, let's leave my behavior. Am I Lamini, my surname?
Yes, your surname
How
is
do you know that?
Dlamini,
How do you know
because
that?
there's a record
Where?
of the portfolio
Have
committee.
you read it?
Yes, I've seen your name there as a member of the committee. It states that you represent
And it's
the
scientifically
EFF.
proven that's
And you
correct.
sign next to your name when you attend that you are Dlamini.
You know, Chairperson, I think it's disappointing. Minister, it's really disappointing that you guys, you went to Robben Island, you educated, your experience, but to really do the things that you are doing, it's a disappointment. Wait, let me finish. It's a disappointment, and it's not helping us. I know that your arrogance and your ego tells you now that you're doing the wrong thing, but it's not the right thing. Actually, we are very disappointed because you are people that we thought at least there's few. All the things that I've asked you, they demonstrate. That's why you're going to perceive that they are billionaires. I'm saying to you, but it's there, it's written. But you choose not to agree with that. Let me just ask you my final question.
Before you ask your final question, sir, I've got the right to reply to what you have just said.
I'll reply then.
You have to substantiate the issues that you refer to, you see. You have not substantiated anything in regard to your accusations that you make about me. There's a simple principle in law. He or she who alleges must prove. You have made allegations here, you see. And you would like the public to believe that the allegations that you make are fact. They are nothing more than simple allegations which you have failed to prove.
Yeah, but I'm sticking to them. By the fact that you can
Yes.
go and have Gupta carry that, the next thing you arrange meetings. It stands.
That's your view.
That's fine. It's my view, but it remains as such. Now, my final question.
Honorable Lamin, your time is up.
So
Really,
I can't.
your time is up.
So I can't ask this question.
No, you can't
Ah,
ask
but
the
it's
last
not. But it's not
question.
necessary because I won't get
Okay,
an answer.
thank
So
you
it's
very
fine.
much. Honorable Swart. Please, honorable members, when you ask questions, give the respondent time to respond. Let us not interject the response of anyone. Same as the respondent, do not interject members when members are asking questions. You are lowering the integrity of this committee and the integrity of this inquiry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Deputy Minister. Deputy Minister, I'm trying to ascertain with the two meetings that were held with Tony Gupta and Dudizana Zuma.
Honorable Swart,
Yes.
please, my apologies. Can you speak to the mic because you are being recorded and you are far from the mic?
I'm trying to time myself as well carefully, Chair, but thank you for that. Maybe I'll ask my colleague to watch the time. The When you had your press conference, you referred to one meeting and you didn't refer to the second meeting. Was that just an omission from your side as far as memory is concerned? Because it's quite significant that there were two distinct meetings with yourself and Mr. Lucky Montana.
With regard to the press engagement, at the press engagement, you'll be asked a question and you'd answer as fully as you think is necessary, relevant to the question that you are asked. So you don't look at all the factors, if I understand you correctly. The answer that I gave on the day I thought was adequate for the question posed.
One does appreciate that when one refers to those meetings, it is a number of years ago, and therefore one's memory might not be very accurate. But when Mr. Lucky Montana, and again one will need to decide on the weight to be attributed to his evidence. We have been criticized for not further cross-examining him yesterday on PROS, and that, as the chair indicated, was not the function of this inquiry. But one of the issues he does raise, and maybe I can just alert you to that, and that is the issue relating to the first meeting where there was, in your version, a discussion relating to the board prior to the Mr. Gupta and Mr. Zuma arriving. And he's very adamant that you had tea. He said, we had a conversation and you had a tea party then, I presume. You had tea. We were joined 30 minutes later by the two gentlemen, and he says it specifically on page 53. The Deputy Minister claimed in his media briefing that we had met to discuss the Board of PROSA. This is not true. On your version, you say that you had met to discuss the Board of PROSA. Is that still your version? Because obviously we've got contradicting versions now on the first meeting.
In regard to the first meeting, from what I recall, the issue of PRASA was raised, and the issue of engagement with Tony Gupta was also raised.
You indicate that the issue of the PRASA board was discussed before the arrival.
Yes, in my engagement with Mr. Montana,
Okay.
that was discussed with him.
And Mr. Montana takes a strong view. He says this is not true. His version is, I had no business to discuss the appointment of the board of PRASA with the Guptas. The minister had introduced them to me and informed me that they were expressed an interest in the PRASA rolling stock fleet renewal program. So I appreciate that there's a difference of opinion as to what was said there, and we're not going to take that any further. You say in that first meeting, at the time there was talk and rumors, and you go on. So your whole version on page 32.1 of your statement is that the whole discussion at the first meeting related to the PRASA board and the possibility of him being removed. That they were going to, and that seems to be more consistent with a latter event. And one appreciates that time has lapsed, that latter, when the letter was sent to you and there was concerns about the board meeting. So one might have a lapse in memory. Do you think that's possible from your side?
I think that's a possibility. As I said, I've not had the opportunity to go to records. I've not looked at files. And even in the meetings that I had with Mr. Montana to discuss the issues of the allegation that there was pressure for them to be removed from their positions, I didn't take notes of those meetings, so I can't say that I've got a record.
And that would be a reasonable explanation given the time lapse and that, and it would be more consistent with Mr. Montana's version of him meeting. The issue of the tender, this multi-billion rand tender is discussed. He goes to Berlin. He then is shocked about the news of Berlin, where people are, you refer to it as a misrepresentation, which is a ground of fraud, that he says here the Guptas were extorting money from manufacturers and had wanted this money to be paid into an account in Dubai. and then they were apparently summoned, the manufacturers, to a meeting in Zurich with Salem Essa. You wouldn't have knowledge of that, but it was at this meeting they were instructed to pay monies as they wanted to get a share of the PRASA new build program. I was so furious at this and saw this as extortion. Then he comes back, and that's the second meeting then that takes place. He called you and requested you to convene a meeting with Mr. Dudizana Zuma and Mr. Tony Gupta. He went to your house. They were there, and the third gentleman, you gave the name. And then he spoke at length at this meeting, and you both condemned the conduct there. Now, what is very interesting here is Mr. Montana says they were arrogant and reminded Mr. Martins, that's yourself, that they did not want me, that's him. But you had convinced them that he was your comrade. After an hour of fighting, do you remember that part at all of the meeting? Again, bearing in mind it took a long time, and it was, you agree that it would be it was an acrimonious meeting?
All I know is that it was an acrimonious meeting.
I appreciate
Yes.
time lapse. So you may have forgotten that that actually did occur. Would you agree with that? That's possible.
That's possible.
So he says, after an hour of fighting, they ultimately relented, but after they had accused me, that's Mr. Lucky Montana, of favoring Bombardier over other companies, I rejected the accusation very strongly. You say the meeting, I think you used the word acrimonious somewhere, did you? And that brought the discussion to an end. So it's quite possible that Mr. Montana is correct in his version. It was an acrimonious meeting. You might not recall specifically that the Guptas were, or Mr. Gupta was upset, and he said, but you know, we didn't want Mr. Lucky Montana. We didn't want him, and we warned you about him. You might not remember that having been said, although that's quite a severe statement. You would surely remember that.
It's quite a severe statement. I don't recall it being said in my presence in that meeting.
You see, Deputy Minister, if one looks at the picture of what one sees with state capture, you see a pattern developing of certain people, certain CEOs, ministers taking positions, and then when they are not compliant, they're being moved out of the way. And it seems, as I say, we haven't, I want to categorize this because I've also been criticized in the media, we haven't interrogated PRASA and the whole issue around that. So I'm not commenting on the character of Mr. Montana. At this stage, there's nothing to disbelieve him on this meeting. But it does seem to play into the narrative of ministers being deployed, that you did meet the Guptas at their home, and there was this meeting, and whilst you don't have a correct reflection of everything, there doesn't seem at this stage to be much to disbelieve Mr. Lucky Montana on the pressure that was brought to bear upon him. Would you tend to agree with that? Yes. And that's fair enough, because as I say, it's a long time ago. And it does play into, because again, when people are not cooperative, then the next step would be to remove them from the board. And that is where the second element came into the removal from the board and the strong letters, and that's where you said the board will not be moved. They're in the middle of this project, the PRASA tender, and you took a very strong standpoint, commendably. Would you agree that there is a pattern already developing at that early stage, although you wouldn't have known it? With hindsight now, you can see a pattern developing of board members being removed to satisfy a certain agenda. Secondly, yourself, when you did not comply with a favor, weren't you soon thereafter, a month later, removed from Minister of Transport to Minister of Energy?
Well, it is correct that a month after that I was removed from transport and made Minister of Energy.
So what I said yesterday to Mr. Montana is, had we, and again, Parliament has a certain oversight role, we might have also erred, but had we all been more focused on being more aware, we would not be in the situation, possibly speculating today, that we're sitting with ESCOM and other SOEs. Would you think in hindsight that that would be a fair observation?
I think if we analyze and look at all these issues with the benefit of hindsight, we would be able to see certain trends. Other postulates might be confirmed, other postulates might not be confirmed.
Correct.
But as
Yeah,
you
sorry.
correctly say, that there's nobody that I know of at this stage who have sat and looked at the trajectory and the phenomena that you have highlighted here.
Correct. And,
So, and
sorry.
that will be necessary to be done.
I think there has been quite a bit of research from here, but I think you correctly say at that stage you had nothing, the family were not that well known, so you had nothing to respond to. But let us just get quickly, I see my time is very limited. What I don't understand, and I've known you for many years, I can't explain, because Ms. Daniels presented her evidence and there's a total denial from you with backing up evidence that you weren't there. Is it possible that she confused the date? But that probably could not happen because you deny totally any meeting with her.
With regard to Ms. Suzanne Daniels, I've had meetings with her. We should recall that she is the company secretary of ESCOM. She is also holding the position of the legal advisor of ESCOM. So in the remit of her responsibilities, there is interaction between the board members of ESCOM, the chair of ESCOM, and the previous chair of ESCOM. She advised very closely. This is Dr. Ben Ngubani. And when there were issues around the matter concerning the payments due or not to Mr. Brian Molefe, we had occasion for the two legal teams of ESCOM and the department to discuss and get clarity on the legal matters concerning Mr. Brian Molefe. So in that context, I did meet her.
What is your relationship with Ms. Daniels, would you say? Your working relationship with Ms. Daniels?
My working relationship with her is fine. It's a person that I've only met in the context of the responsibilities that I assumed. I don't know her at a personal level. I don't have any reason to have a grudge or something against her. But in the context of the ministerial engagements with ESCOM and her role, the two roles that she had there, we spoke. And some of the conversations in regard to trying to advise the minister, obviously when you have two legal teams and they differ there, we'd be able to come in and try and mediate.
I've got 20 seconds left.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask you, sorry, Mr. Deputy Minister, but she alleges that that whole meeting related to that specific Molefe issue, and you said in your press statement, you said as head of legal, firstly, you admit to admonishing her in the past, and secondly, you called her a clueless ignoramus. Do you still hold to that view, that she's a clueless ignoramus?
I think in regard to the first portion of what you stated in regard to her responsibilities, in the meetings that we held with the chairperson and the minister, and in regard to some of the decisions that she had taken as company secretary and legal advisor to ESCOM, I differed and pointed out certain things there. In regard to the issue of ignoramus.
Clueless ignoramus.
Yeah, clueless ignoramus.
Yeah.
You have to read that sentence in context.
Can I read it to
The
you?
entire sentence and what precedes.
Sure.
it.
You said,
Yes.
as the head of legal, Ms. Daniels should account to Parliament for what happened under her watch, rather than seek to use the occasion to reinvent herself as a clueless ignoramus. Do you think
correct.
that's what she did in her evidence here?
I believe that there are issues that she could better attest to and give clarity on. One of the issues from the top of my head, I think in May sometime, she came to the portfolio committee as the head of legal, as the company secretary. And the Brian Molefe issue was discussed here in regard to payments. And there's a version of events that she gave to the portfolio committee. Later on, when she comes, her testimony contradicts what she had said here.
I understand that, and just as much as we might on the probabilities differ, but it's
Yes.
a very strong term from a, and it's not normally knowing you as a person, language that you would use normally, and it seems, but one does understand, but it's a very strong indictment. But Chair, that's the end of my time and my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Swart. Honorable Mganga Kabash.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good afternoon, Deputy Minister.
Good afternoon, honorable member.
Thank you. My question is similar or a follow-up to what has been raised earlier on. Let's say, for argument's sake, Ms. Daniels has might have confused the dates. Did such an activity or occasion, be it a tea party or a tea gathering or breakfast or lunch or dinner, ever taken place in any day with the people that she mentioned, where you were also in attendance?
No, honorable member.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mganga Kabasha. Honorable No Banda.
Thank you, Chairperson. I don't have much, thank you. Minister, why do you think Ms. Daniels, what do you think were her reasons for saying you were in a meeting that you believe you were not part of?
Honorable member, I really don't know why she would say that.
So Ms. Daniels would just somehow make up this date, this time, this meeting with yourself and Mr. Ajay Gupta and Duduzani Gupta, where you all discussed, where you discussed Brian Molefe's payments, according to you.
As I said, I can't answer for her, but from my perspective, I don't know why she would have said that. I can tell you that I've had a meeting with her, the DG and others at my house, where the legal teams were trying to find a way of dealing with the issue around Mr. Brian Molefe.
Thank you. Have you ever met or do you know Mr. Salim Essa?
I've seen Mr. Salim Essa, but it's not a person that I know closely. I know that he's a business associate of Mr. Gupta.
You've never had a meeting with him besides Tony Gupta?
No, no.
Nothing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Nobanda. Honorable Luyeng.
Thanks, Chairperson. Deputy Minister, I would want to get explanation for a number of issues, but few. One, as a senior member of the ANC, knowing it for a fact that there are resolutions that were taken by NGCs, by NECs, for the outrooting of corruption and corrupt elements within the government machinery. And Parliament is actually implementing that. How best can you assist that process at your level?
The responsibility that everyone has in position of government, whatever the role that you occupy, is to ensure that you do not condone corrupt practices, you do not enter into corrupt practices, and ensure that the space that you are responsible for, you make sure that the principles of clean governance are adhered to.
If all what has been said by Mr. Montana yesterday here has anything to go by, where he put it very clear to the country that the perception that is outside there, that in the looting of state resources, there is this particular family of the Guptas that is actually behind those elements, in fact perpetuated by certain leaders and members of the community, including leaders of the ANC. A mention of our prominent leaders has been made, even though not necessarily linked to the Gupta family. Now, as a senior member of the ANC, what is it that you can do to assist this process and in ensuring that what Mr. Mondana was saying is not just something, if it is proved beyond reasonable doubt, that those prominent leaders of the ANC whose names were mentioned are actually correct to have contributed in this quagmire? What can you say, what can you do as a senior member of the ANC?
Honorable Member, with due respect, I don't regard myself as a senior member of the ANC. I don't sit on the NEC, I don't sit on any other important structure. I'm an ordinary branch member. But I understand the tone and timbre and context in which you say it. All I would say is that the members of the Gupta family have been mentioned. But the most important thing for me would be for somebody to lay a charge so that there can be a follow-up of a court case. Right now, we don't have, or at least let me qualify that. I don't have knowledge of people who have gone to lay charges. Perhaps they've done so. So it would be important that those cases be expedited so that anybody who has transgressed, who has broken the law, should be taken to court without fear or favor. I did say earlier on, I did not have the privilege of being here yesterday to listen to the entire testimony of Comrade Mr. Lucky Montana. I did hear that he mentioned the name of ANC senior leaders. If that is the case, I would re-emphasize the basic principle that nobody is above the law. If I have broken the law, if any official of the ANC has broken the law, the people with the relevant information should ensure that those people are charged. Because if they are not charged in their personal capacity, then it gives succor to the narrative that the ANC is corrupt. The ANC cannot be corrupt. Individual members who abuse their positions in the ANC can be corrupt. So then that is a responsibility for all members to ensure that those who are engaged in corruption are brought to book.
Thank you. You are talking like a senior leader, not a senior member. But the necessity is that for being appointed by the ANC to be a deputy minister and a minister, you are definitely a senior member trusted within the ranks of the ANC. It is necessary that I say that. Do you know Zodwa Manasseh, a certain Zodwa Manasseh, who is a risk manager?
I think the name of Ms. Zodwa Manasseh rings a bell in my mind. If I'm not wrong, she's a chartered accountant.
Is there any moment where you actually differed with the leadership at Transport when Mr. Montana was rejecting approaches for him to break the policies of supply chain? And if that is the case, how did you assist him? Secondly, on the issue that relates to the wedding plane,
Perhaps could we kindly just deal with this so that I remember the drift of your question?
I just want you to,
Okay.
to note these two last questions so that you deal with them before I run out of my time. That the issue of the landing of the plane that is coming from abroad, can it land anywhere?
I've noted the one with the landing of the plane. If you could kindly just refresh me on the first question.
Is it possible that an international
No,
plane
I did get that.
Okay.
The landing aspect of the plane I did get. But now I recall you seem to have asked a question pertaining to Comrade Mr. Montana, saying that was the incident where undue pressure was placed on him. Yeah. In my workings with officials, I've said it very clear to them that nobody should be in a position to compel them to do anything that is irregular or untoward in regard to their responsibilities. That's a point that I've made in all the departments that I've served. I've even said to staff members or officials that your responsibility is not to carry out the instructions of ministers willy-nilly. Your responsibility is based on your qualifications and integrity. So your responsibility is to give the best advice. After having given that advice, whether the minister agrees with your advice or not, you should be able to sleep with a clear conscience that you have given the requisite advice.
The very last one.
Or in regard to the landing of planes, aeroplanes, there's paperwork that has to be filled in based on the capacity, the size of the plane as to where they can land. And necessary permissions have to be sought from the Air Traffic Navigation Systems Authority. So they deal with those authorizations.
Play any role in the acquisition of the landing rights by the Gupta family in relation to the wedding?
No. As I said earlier, the remit of my responsibility as the Minister of Transport then was for civil aviation, aeroplanes, But in regard to the military aspect, I had no role there. That fell under the remit of the responsibility of the Department of Defense. They are responsible for Waterkloof. So in regard as to how that plane landed there, I was not consulted.
I rest my case, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Luyange. Honorable Tsedi.
The Deputy Minister, let me indicate up front, I have a problem with a meeting that is arranged at your official residence with people who have business interest. You even go to an extent of inviting the CEO to that meeting, and you want the committee to believe that this was an official meeting and not a private meeting. A direct question maybe. Why was it not necessary for the DG to be part of that meeting?
In none of my submissions, nor did I ever say that that was an official meeting. It was a meeting, I stated that it was a meeting at my residence.
So it was a private meeting?
Yes, it was a meeting that I facilitated between Mr. Tony Gupta and Mr. Lucky Montana. The purpose to get that information that he required.
The reason why I'm talking about private and official.
Official.
I wanted to understand if this meeting was convened in your capacity as a minister.
The issue is that if you are a minister, it's difficult to say that if I convene this meeting, I convene it in my personal capacity, or I convene it as a minister. My conceptualization of that meeting is that it was convened by the Minister of Transport. I was the Minister of Transport, but it was an informal meeting at my residence.
Okay, no, that's fine. In May 2013, you refused to give permission to the Gupta family for the plane to land at OR International. In May, the same year, you are deployed from transport to the Department of Energy. Will you disagree with people who will say these two events are related?
It's
hardly a month, I think, yeah.
I cannot say that the two events are not related. I can only go back to the issue that is the president who decides who is a minister or who is not a minister. My understanding is that you serve at the pleasure of the president, and if he redeploys you, he has the prerogative to disappoint you in both senses of that word, disappoint.
Okay. The paragraph 30, the food fair, let's go back to the food fair organized by the Guptas again. I know ministers to be people who have, whose schedules are very, very hectic. Here is a family that organizes a food fair. Ministers, not a minister. Ministers put all their programs aside, activate their blue lights and go to that meeting. Will you agree with me, disagree with me if I say this is another indication of the extent to which the family is influential?
I would say that we need to put things into perspective. Ministers, deputy ministers can have busy schedules, but it does not mean that they never have free time. And my recollection about this food fair was on a Saturday morning. And you decide to go there. You are not compelled to go there. It's not an official function where the presidency would say that here's a function, this lineup of ministers are required here, or you have to go to some embassy's national day. Okay. Those you can't avoid.
Okay, no, that's fine. Yeah. You try to clarify the Lucky Montana issue, the one that is raised yesterday. The impression that you created at the press briefing, that he introduced the Guptas to you, and now you clarified it very well today, that you introduced the Guptas to Lucky, not the other way around. Just on the, can you just try and clarify, just for the record? Because from what Lucky was saying yesterday, the impression he has is that he introduced the Guptas to you.
No, what I did say at the press conference, I said one of the occasions at which I met members of the Gupta family, I cited the issue concerning PRASA. And at that press conference, I said, Dikobe Ben Martins, organized the interaction between Mr. Tony Gupta and Mr. Lucky Montana. But somewhere along the line, what he understood, or perhaps what somebody told him about the press conference was, it was said that you, Lucky Montana, took the Guptas to Dikobe Ben Martins, which was not the case.
No, that's fine. The second last one. The meeting that Lucky requested when he came back from Berlin to show his displeasure about the Guptas using the name of the president and the two of you. And you even indicated today that you even reprimanded them for their conduct. How did they respond?
Obviously, they were very defensive and saying that it was an untruth. And like he said that, but the people that I engaged in my various meetings overseas said that this is what you all sought to do. So he was very strong and forthright in regard to that point.
Okay. The very last one, Chair, I'm concluding now. A number of people have raised concerns, including those who came to appear before the committee to testify. Yeah. They have raised concerns about the influence of the family in government, particularly in the awarding of tenders. Do you think people have reasons to be worried about this influence?
I think reasonably, anybody would have reason to be concerned. If they had to look at the tender records of various state departments and found that they were normally a particular company that belongs to particular people are given the tenders concerned, that would be cause for worry. It's just like if there are black economic empowerment projects to be given, and they are always given to the same people, then there's something wrong there.
Thank you very much, honorable members. I just want also to set a record straight that, and correct Honorable Tsaidi, your question as it was responded by the Deputy Minister. Mr. Lucky Montana said he was introduced to the Guptas by the Deputy Minister. The Deputy Minister called him in a meeting where the Gupta family was present. So it's not him introducing the Deputy Minister to the Guptas. Let me welcome Honorable Singh. Welcome to South Africa, and compliments of the season. We see you for the first time
Yes.
since last year.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I apologize for.
Thank you very much for that clarification, and your apology has been accepted. I think there is no second round on the questions to the Deputy Minister. We have asked our Deputy Minister questions to our satisfaction. And I think he responded to his and to your satisfaction as members of Parliament. Deputy Minister, what I want to raise, I would wish to Honorable Gungubel.
Come across as being disruptive. I think we should, maybe you can check the Hansard, whatever. My understanding of Honorable Said was that he was articulating the response of Montana based on his perception of the situation. He was not saying what Montana said. And I think we should need to go to what to call.
We will do that. Thank you very much. Deputy Minister, the statement that you made, the press statement that you made, I want to bring it to your attention that this committee has found insulting to the committee and to the work of the committee, especially when you said the work of this committee works as a kangaroo court. It was very much insulting, and it almost disturbed us as a committee, because we are a committee that you belong to. You are a Deputy Minister of Public Enterprises. We are a committee of public enterprises. A committee constituted in Parliament and a constitutional body. Our terms of reference, Deputy Minister, were very clear. Our principle has always been the same, and we said it again and again that if you are implicated, you must come forward. You would be given a chance to respond to what you are implicated in. I think, Deputy Minister, even if you won't see it befitting now, but you owe us an apology as this committee, because when we decided to take this decision, when we took this decision, we had your blessings. When we took the decision of taking the inquiry forward, we had your blessings. That I can assure you. You assured us that you will be behind us in this process, but in our dismay and disappointment, you uttered such words in public instead of coming to us, because we are your children as the committee. We work with you. We want to work with you going forward. Oh, we are oh, okay, we are not your children, Minister. Anyway, it's just a Xhosa phrase that maybe I take it from Xhosa as it is, and I've put it in English, and people who understand English more than me took it the other way. So, but we are not your children, literally, we are not your children. Deputy Minister, according to South African law, or according to the laws of the country, you cannot be charged by meeting the Guptas. We are going to meet the Guptas, and I'm looking forward to meeting the Guptas, and I am not, I am sure that for us to meet the Guptas as this committee, we are not doing any criminal act for meeting the Guptas, but we are looking forward to work with you in developing the country, and also in fighting corruption in the government and in the ruling party. Those were my closing remarks. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much for allowing us to have interaction with you because we have been looking for this moment for a long time. Since last year, we wanted this moment to come, but it has come. I am
Chair, with your kind permission, there's the issue that you mentioned of a kangaroo court and a letter. I would humbly ask the Portfolio Committee and yourself as the chairperson to privilege me with a copy of the letter that I'm alleged to have written, and where I've said that this committee is a kangaroo court. I have never ever said that this committee is a kangaroo court. I would like whoever has articulated this to provide the requisite proof. It is not the first time that I've heard this, but I am happy that you have raised it in committee in this meeting. And I would be grateful if I can be provided with that statement where I wrote or said on TV or in any media that this committee is a kangaroo court. I've never ever done so.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. I don't have a letter. You did not write us a letter, but it's what came out of the media statement that you made. But for now, the committee stands adjourned.